Hello, everybody, and welcome into Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I'm Nick Bate, joined as always by Ricardo Martinez Paz. We are back in the playoffs. Eagles making another run to the NFC Championship game. Second time they've done so in the last 3 seasons. So exciting end of the year for the Eagles. Not so exciting end of the year for the Steelers. We'll touch on that a little bit later in this episode. But the focus right now is on the Eagles. And with that, I asked my partner, Ricardo, how you doing, man?
Good, man. It's been a while since we've done one of these. I'm glad, at least one of our teams is still alive. But yeah, it's oh boy, we're getting like that. The more days that pass by, the more nervous I get leading up to this game against the Commanders. So yeah, no, but overall, I'm excited, nervous, feeling everything imaginable. But yeah, how are you, dude?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Enjoying the playoffs nonetheless, even with the Steelers eliminated. I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, kind of frustrating them getting eliminated, but, hard to also not kind of see it coming a little bit the way the team closed out the regular season, losing their last, 4 games and limping into the playoffs was kind of brutal. But
Yeah,
I've still, this has been a great NFL season. I think the storylines that we're kind of getting going into, conference championship weekend here is pretty exciting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But let's first break down a little bit more about how the Eagles got here. More specifically, honestly, a pretty awesome game against the Rams. I mean, if I say so myself, just in terms of like, you gotta love when you have snow football in January, in a playoff game, in a great atmosphere like Philadelphia, lively atmosphere like Philadelphia. You never know when the snowballs are going to start coming out with those Philly fans. So kind of a crazy atmosphere, crazy sort of circumstances. And then the game didn't disappoint either, with it really kind of getting to be really close at the end when it looked like the Eagles were kind of pulling away in the fourth quarter. So I guess we'll jump into some of the takeaways from that game, and I'll let you kind of kickstart that.
yeah, that was took years off my life, but that's normally how it goes in the playoffs, and especially for the Eagles, they sometimes make it way closer than it has to be. But in any case, yeah, the one thing that I guess one of the few takeaways from that game I'd say is the defense has been coming up big, and this isn't just the Rams game; it's also the Packers going back 2 weeks ago. I mean, they had 3 interceptions against Jordan Love against the Packers, and then Stafford, he fumbled twice, or Kyron Williams fumbled once, and Stafford twice, lost one. And they're just timely plays. They sacked him. Jalen Carter at the end of the game on that third down with a huge sack, and he just blew right past the center. And I mean, I think Higbee was wide open. One of the tight ends was wide open there, or it was Cooper Kupp. It might have been that. And he honestly probably would have scored. And I think the Eagles would have lost the game had that sack not happened. But this defense just continues to, carry their weight, carry the load, and really just deliver in such clutch moments. I mean, even going back to Nolan Smith and that strip sack, and it looked like, the Eagles were going to, they were struggling, and Jalen Hurts got kind of banged up, and all the snow was coming down, and then for that strip sack to happen in that moment, and then to add on 3 more points after the safety, that was massive, giving him a 4-point cushion. So I mean, it's just the defense is making plays when they matter most.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to cut you off or anything there, but just to kind of like add something to that there with, I mean, honestly, from my viewpoint on it, man, that third down sack by Jalen Carter, I mean, I think without a doubt, well, let me get your opinion on this. From my perspective, that may arguably be the biggest play of the Eagles season this year. It may arguably be the biggest play that the Eagles have had the past 3 years. Now, obviously, you could go back to the Super Bowl run and obviously losing to the Chiefs that game and, look at some plays that maybe getting them there were just as big, if not bigger. But, man, after that, Puka Nacua catch down the sideline, imagine all of Philadelphia was sweating pretty heavily at that point. And, Jalen Carter to kind of come up with the sack in that moment had a really good game. And really, just on top of being kind of like the focal point of this defensive line this season, really kind of taking the bull by the horns. I mean, that play was just massive. I don't know. I mean, is it fair to say that maybe that's right up there with, kind of some of these top Eagles moments in recent memory?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, it definitely was the biggest of the season, the biggest play. It saved their season basically. Like I said, I think the Rams would have won. I don't think the Eagles would have, trotted onto the field and, considering the conditions, gotten a field goal and Jake Elliott being, very inconsistent and having a really down year for his standards. I really don't think the Eagles would have come back and won that game, especially with the time ticking as well on that same drive. But yeah, that definitely saved their season. It was the biggest play of the season over the last couple of years. Yeah, probably up there. I'd say maybe
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts
it's
was
tough.
like
Definitely
touchdown
go
run,
back
maybe
and really
Super
kind of
Bowl.
analyze some of the plays through each season of like, what was kind of like a turning point, I guess, in some of these games. But with how pivotal that moment was, with the Rams seemingly having all the momentum, just I mean, there's no other way to put it. It kind of, and I mean, you said it yourself with Cooper Cup wide open, across the middle. I mean, it really did save the Eagles' season.
Yeah, I mean, it was just this defense, man. Just the entire season has come up big, and in most instances, the only time they didn't really was against Jaden Daniels, and obviously that game-winning drive in the second game. But that's kind of a different story because Jalen Hurts got injured. We'll get into that, or I'll get into that later. But that was probably the only time they faltered. They didn't stand. I think back to like the Jaguars. Nakobe Dean had the interception against Trevor Lawrence in the end zone, and that sealed the game for them. Like they've made plays. Like I said, they like when they've mattered most. When the game's on the line, they have made those plays. So this to me, I guess, even in the moment, I was thinking they were going to score. The Rams were going to score, but it doesn't surprise me that one of the players, one of the superstars on the defense, came up clutch basically.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And while we're on the defense, something else I want to point out that I feel like was so huge for the Eagles in this game. I mean, this was something I asked you about. This is something I was asking all my Eagles friends about. Was just how big that loss of Nakobe Dean was going to be in this game and just moving forward. Oren Burks had a really good game.
Yeah,
I feel like stepping up for him, stepping into that role, and also, the Rams. It's interesting because this game felt like the Eagles were pulling away with it, and the Rams came back close. But the reason that it felt on top of the turnovers like the Eagles were pulling away is because constantly they were getting timely stops of really, it felt like for the most part, Kyron Williams in the backfield, really
yeah,
just kind of
yeah,
shutting him down on, big third and fourth downs. And, a lot of that was kind of centered around just like, linebackers making plays in the backfield. And I think that that's something where, if the Rams convert a couple more of those, extend a couple more drives, maybe get into the end zone one or two more times, I mean, we're talking about a very different result. So it's like you said, definitely the team is leaning on the defense right now. And I think those timely stops on third and fourth down and short to go were huge in this game.
yeah. There are two that come to mind. The C.J. Gardner Johnson one when I think it was the first quarter. Their second quarter might have been, but yeah, it was a third down. They ran it with Kyron Williams, and CJ Gardner Johnson just shoots up the middle and stops him short, and the Rams settle for the field goal. And in that moment, I thought the Rams were going to go for it because it was, still before the snow. But Sean McVay, a little too conservative, some might argue in that situation. But that was a huge one, and the other one was Josh Sweat, who also had one another third down, also stopped and blew him up in the backfield. So yeah, again, two big moments, and like you said, those two conversions. I mean, lack of conversions, went a long way, and then they forced a punt on that same drive. So, yeah, again, this defense is just flying everywhere. Like Oren Burks, going back to that. I mean, yeah, he did have a way better game than I thought he was going to have. There were talks about him splitting time with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and and then he only ended up playing 4 snaps, and then Orenberg's the rest. So, I mean, it tells you one that Fangio would trust a veteran in this situation as opposed to a rookie. But it also just shows his trust in Oren Burks generally, and that he can be a serviceable backup even without Nakobe Dean there. It's not. I hope he keeps it up also, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's 2 more games that it's kinda gonna hinge on that, obviously, well, potentially 2 more games, knock on wood,
Yeah,
but, it's a big spot to kinda fill in, and, I think it's just a testament too to this defense. It's like the ability for them to just kind of, like, seamlessly, lose such a key cog in the defense, bring in the backup, and yet it feels like the defense doesn't miss a beat against, a Rams offense that really, kind of played well all game outside of the couple turnovers, couple defensive stops, and it's clearly with Stafford and Kyron Williams a strong point of their team. So, yeah, absolutely, defense was huge in this game.
yeah, and I guess I'll flip it over to the other side on offense. Another takeaway. I mean, this is probably the biggest one. Saquon again, dude. I don't know how many times I've said here, like, Saquon is the best player on the field pretty much every single game. He has been the best player on the field every single game, and to rip off 250+ yard touchdowns again against the Rams when obviously they were going to focus in and hone in on stopping him and make 2 mistakes. One of them that I'm pretty sure is a single high. Single high. It was the first touchdown run. They ran single high and weren't really expecting 3rd and 4 for Saquon to run or them to call a run, and then he pops that one off, runs. I mean, that was already electric enough. And then the second one to what I thought was going to be the game sealer, that one too in the
Yeah,
snow. And the way he just, I mean, the blocking, I have to say, on those specific plays were just amazing. And even if there's like nothing there, sometimes it just Saquon makes something out of nothing. It's just he's so special to watch. It's just oh my god, the records he's breaking and the amount he's carrying, him and the offensive line carrying this team right now. I mean, the passing attack is done. I mean, it's struggled, but it's done enough. But Saquon is Saquon and the defense clearly carrying this team, and that's where they are. Where they are.
yeah. It really makes you kind of wonder where this team would be if they didn't have Saquon Barkley, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely kind of where my thoughts sort of jump to. I mean, even when you talk about the passing attack, it's like, what's the best thing that kind of came from this game when Jalen Hurts actually dropped back? And I'm pretty sure it was a scramble and not a design run, but that was the run that he ripped off in the first quarter. I don't think there was really much more that you could say was really going necessarily overly well for the passing attack. And
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. I mean, this is Saquon Barkley's offense and Saquon Barkley's team. I mean, this is no longer a machine that's led by the passing attack of Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. I mean, this is what honestly you have been saying for the last 2 years is the Eagles just needed to focus on running the ball more behind
Yep.
this top tier offensive line, and they've also now got the best running back in the NFL to go along with it.
Yeah, like it's really not that hard. Just lean on him, let him do his thing. Obviously, there are mouths to feed, but when your best player is a running back, like I'm sorry, but like I don't care how many touches he gets, he could get like 20, 30. Like you just gotta feed him. You gotta give him the ball, especially like I'm surprised, this whole season they haven't run more screens or more designed, plays to him in the air at least, but yeah, it's just he opens up the offense like no other player does. So it's
Yeah,
just
man.
explosive.
It's incredible. I mean, one of the best free agent acquisitions I think that we've ever seen in our lifetimes
Yeah, yeah,
in the NFL for sure. So it has certainly paid dividends for the Eagles and what they are on the road to potentially achieving this year.
yeah. The one other thing I'll say, kind of going the other side of the offense, the passing attack, we kind of alluded to it, struggling. Um, AJ Brown had a down game. Jalen Hurts got kind of banged up. The snow definitely didn't help, but Hurts held on to the ball a little too long on some of those sacks that he took. The offensive line has been a little worrisome in pass protection the last 2 games. I mean, they've only allowed, well, the PFF, I think, credits them with 4 sacks in the 2 games, but I just it seem Jalen Hurts is under a little more pressure, it seems like, and he's not helping himself holding onto the ball too long. But and then overall, just the scheming of some of these plays, Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni draw up. It just like the spacing sometimes doesn't make sense situationally, doesn't quite make sense. Like it's just not quite there. It's not like we've seen glimpses of how good they can be. And the Steelers game is probably one of those games. Not to, you know, bring your team down by
Beat a
any
dead
means,
horse.
but
Yeah.
it was just but it's just not there. It's not. I don't know. They just haven't put it together, and that's what worries me. Because like right now, it's working because like running the football and kind of leaning on your defense because you're in the lead most times. But when it comes to when you're trailing, that's what worries me because that could very much be the case against the Commanders. That's an explosive offense. It's like a part of me feels like they're not opening up the playbook as much as as they should be. Jalen Hurts isn't really airing it out, and that's also kind of it's a bit on both coordinator and quarterback, but like he's just dumping it down, which is fine. It's conservative. Like they're not turning the football over, but at some point you gotta let loose a little bit, and that's I don't know. I don't know if we'll see that version of the offense in the next game or in the Super Bowl. That's a little concern of mine, but they've gotten away with it.
It's definitely interesting, and I mean, it's kind of like the type of thing where, and I don't want to preview kind of the next game going forward here, but it's a little bit of a different, and I don't want to discredit anything that the Packers, even though the Packers were very run heavy with Josh Jacobs this season, but more so I guess with the Rams, I don't want to discredit those passing attacks, but this is exactly the type of thing where, like, yes, the Eagles can run the football and control the clock potentially, but in that situation where they potentially get behind, that's where you kind of start to worry a little bit about what the outcome could potentially be. So it's definitely going to be something that I guess we can talk about a little bit more when we preview the Eagles Commanders game. But do you have anything else that you want to add from this Eagles run to this stage against the Rams and everything?
I think I've said everything. Overall, they're doing what they've done all season. Like I said, relying on Saquon, the defense, passing attack, doing just enough. So, and not turning it over,
Yeah.
which is huge.
And while we wrap up to this point, before we get into the Steelers, why don't we touch on stock up, stock down for the Eagles? I know I mentioned to you just with kind of where the Steelers are, I think it's kind of better to do a more holistic review on, kind of the disappointing end of their season rather than stock up, stock down. So let's touch on your Eagles stock up, stocks down from this game and the playoffs so far.
Stock down, I'll start with AJ Brown. He only had 1 catch in the first game against the Packers, and then he had 2 pretty big drops in this game against the Rams. I know his knee is bothering him. That doesn't really affect his hands necessarily, but it's a little worrisome that I mean, he's not catching the balls that he should be catching. Like 99% of the time, it seems like he would. And the knee injury, I mean, it is hampering him a little bit, and you can kind of tell he's a step slow, and he's not quite getting out of his breaks as well and as smoothly, and not really. He's struggling a little bit with press coverage too because of that knee, but that's again, there's just a lot of factors, and the snow didn't really help, like I said. But I maybe it's just a one-off. Maybe it's just they're 2 off, I guess, these 2 games, but yeah, I don't know. It's slightly concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it's also kind of, tough too because and I know that this is an old adage, but it's like everybody's dealing with something at this point of the season. I mean, you don't make it
Yeah,
this deep into the season without having something, hampering you. I think this kind of harpens back a little bit to just the struggles of the passing attack overall. And I mean, we've said it before, like when he's not out there, this Eagles passing attack is even worse. And,
yeah,
maybe it is something a little bit there where, just his lack of involvement, is just kind of like affecting this passing game overall. It's hard to kind of pinpoint to this stage, and it may just be as simple as like, hey, they're running the ball so much and so effectively that the pass game just naturally takes a little bit of a backseat here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's makes sense, but yeah, I mean, I would like to see him bounce back in the next game. But in any case, then the other one I have is I already said this: the offensive line, at least in pass protection, run blocking, they're amazing. They're the best offensive line. It's just they've blown a few assignments, and the first example is, I mean, the Cam Jurgens kind of, I forget which defender it was, but he kind of just totally whiffed on him, and that led to the safety, which Jalen Hurts probably could have prevented too. So if he just dumped it off, but it's a little concerning that they're now, it seems like, struggling a little bit with communication on the front, but in run blocking they're fine, they're amazing, but just pass protection has to be a little better, and it's below the standard of what they know they can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's valid, certainly valid. And I mean, we saw it a lot too. I think you kind of touched on this where, part of it too is Jalen Hurts holding onto the ball a little bit too long. I mean, you mentioned that there on
Yeah,
that play. He probably could have dumped it off. And, that's definitely a lot of what I saw. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of twofold a little bit. And, definitely on the offensive line to pick it up a little bit. So I think that's absolutely valid.
and then I guess I'll move to suck up Nolan Smith. He's been he's turned it on, man. He's really, I think he's living up, definitely living up to the first round, you know, pick that he was at number 30. He has 9.5 sacks in his last 14 games, and only 7 players have more than that. So that's a pretty good run. And obviously came up with the strip sack of Stafford. That was huge. And then 2 sacks of Jordan Love's. Believe they were the only 2 sacks of that game the Eagles had. So yeah, he's just been on a different level on a defensive line, and he's just watching how athletic he is. It's just like now, I fully see why we drafted him. He's such a high motor. Like maybe the technique's not fully there, but athleticism and like work ethic, work rate, it's all there. Like it's just a matter of fully putting it together, and I think he's starting to do that.
Yeah, man, it's exciting to see. I mean, I remember us talking about it when they drafted him, and this was a player that I liked a lot. I mean, he got a knock because he was undersized a little bit, but
Yeah,
even with that, I mean, it's like those kind of intangibles you bring the motor, the work ethic, like those are things that aren't always present in players, and it's harder to coach into them.
yeah,
You definitely can't change size, but when you've got kind of just that work ethic that goes into it, and then all of a sudden that athleticism meets good technique, and it all kind of comes together like you're saying, and maybe this is sort of like the flash that we're seeing of what this can be as a player going forward, and he's kind of discovering that or starting to discover it at the perfect time.
yeah. I mean, he's that defensive lineman. They're playing really well. The last one, Dallas Goddard. Um, he's been efficient. I mean, he's caught all of his targets, if I'm not mistaken. He had 4 catches, 47 yards, and that stiff arming touchdown against the Packers. That was just really. I was there. I watched that. That was sick. Seeing that live in person, just him just he was kind of taunting him a little bit, just like, yeah, come to me, and I'll just throw you off again. But that there was that, and then 4 catches, 56 yards against the Rams. He's had a few big conversions to extend drives. So he's looked good. He's looked sharp since coming back from his injury. So I like what I'm seeing from him at least.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, it's great to have him back in the fold, and makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, man, good stock up, stock down. I guess we'll transition a little bit into talking about the Steelers, just from the fact that I don't want to give a stock up to them after kind of the way that the season came to an end. It's frustrating to say the least, man. I mean,
Yeah,
this was a team that had the chance to win the division, and then just with very poor play down the stretch, ultimately choked that away. And going into the playoffs, I mean, there wasn't really much optimism on my end. I still kind of told myself like, hey, Steelers always play the Ravens tough. Maybe something can happen here. Maybe they keep it close, and they get it bounced to just kind of go their way, and maybe Boswell puts a field goal up late that gives them a slight edge. I kept that optimism, but at heart, it was like this was a team that just wasn't. They were playing some of their worst football down the stretch, and I think there's kind of a number of reasons for that. I think the first is just the offense just kind of became very George Pickens dependent
Yeah.
at a certain point during the season. Then they lost him for that stretch, and it felt like even when he came back into the fold, something was just off there. And that was an aspect of it, but also on the offensive side, just a real inability to move the football, convert third downs, and like keep your defense off the field. And especially in the playoff game, I feel like that's shown through. The defense was on the field the entire first half. I mean, it was insane. The Steelers, it felt like barely had possession, barely were able to kind of move the ball. I mean, the game ended up being, closer than it felt 20, just a two felt closer than it felt closer than it was, and it was still a two
Yeah.
touchdown game. So
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of tells you everything you need to know in that aspect. And then obviously after the game, the conversations kind of start of, what's the future of Mike Tomlin? Is it time for a change of scenery? Is it time for a new voice in Pittsburgh? Obviously, a conversation is the quarterback position, as it's been since Ben Roethlisberger retired. But before I kind of get into those two big sort of like subcategories of the Steelers, I just want to see if you have any kind of feedback or opinion on the Steelers and what we're kind of talking about here with their early playoff exit.
I think I texted this to you. It felt kind of like the Eagles last year, where they just ran out of gas, and I guess kind of defending the Steelers a little bit. They had the second half of the season was a gauntlet. I mean, they went through division opponents twice. They went, and the Chiefs were in there, the Eagles were in there. Like, there was just no let up whatsoever. Like, that's, I feel like, part of the reason why they ran out of gas, because they just played tough opponent after tough opponent for like 8 straight weeks. But obviously, you got to play who's in front of you. But certainly the schedule did no favors for them. And similar to the Eagles last year, where they just had that gauntlet period of their schedule, and then they just fell off at the end. So, and it's also very uncharacteristic of the Steelers, because in recent seasons, they play their best football at the end. So, and it just obviously didn't happen this time around. And yeah, it was definitely surprising. And I kind of agree with you on the George Pickens front, where it felt like they were so reliant on him. And there was, I don't know.
I mean, that was definitely a big factor down the stretch of the regular season in terms of obviously the gauntlet of the schedule, but not having him in the offense just, didn't seem to be able to adjust. And part of it I want to put on the, offensive line a little bit in terms of like, A, they suffered a ton of injuries on the offensive line this year. But, B, also at the end of the day, it felt like they were playing, like the offensive line was playing some of their worst football towards the end of the season. I mean, how many times was there a 3rd and 4th or short that this team just couldn't, move the sticks on? And that's one of the Tomlinisms that I've always kind of gravitated towards the most, is if you can't, get 1 yard, you don't deserve to win the football game. And I feel like that was one of the things that really kind of shone through. But more than anything else, and I think this is one of the first things we have to get into, is just like how very quickly the narrative changed with Russell Wilson. Because it went for me, I know it was a bad defense against Cincinnati, but, putting up 44 points, and getting that big win against Cincinnati, I believe that was in week 13, followed up by the win against Cleveland, where you win by, 10 points.
Yep.
You feel like you're kind of heading in the right direction, beating 2 divisional opponents, and then all of a sudden this thing just collapsed, falls off the rails. And it honestly leads me to wonder a little bit, like, look, like I think Russell Wilson still has some gas in the tank, but in terms of like what his involvement is for the futures of the Steelers team, like I'm looking at it from the perspective of, like, you still have TJ Watt in his prime for another 3 to 5 seasons. You still have Cam Hayward. I mean, he was an all-pro this year.
Yeah.
How much longer is that going to last? Like, you have these here, and you've invested so much capital into the defense that it's like, what is the answer at the quarterback position? I don't know if it's Russell Wilson at this point. I honestly, kind of lean more towards it's not at this stage than anything else. And it's frustrating because, like, a lot of Steelers fans want to say, hey, give Justin Fields a contract and see what happens there. He's the younger guy, but like, does any of this really solve what Pittsburgh needs in the quarterback room? Because I feel like at the end of the day, you're just kind of kicking the can down the road to ultimately finding a solution there.
Yeah. See, this was always going to be the issue after the season. It was just like, all right, well, you have two quarterbacks on one with 1 year remaining on their deals or whatever. So, and then you were going to have to bench one of them. That one's not going to play. That was just the whole dilemma from the start. Like you knew this was going to happen, and you saw Justin Fields. He was good for the weeks he started, and then Russell Wilson just seemed a little better. But yeah, it's a really really tough situation to be because I don't really know what they do either. Is like you keep one of them or no? Because you're not keeping both. Definitely not.
Yeah, I think you're keeping one or the other. I mean, I think part of it is money too. Like, I don't know how much Russell Wilson is going to weigh, like wanting to cash in again versus, realizing, hey, he had some success here in Pittsburgh. Does he just want to capitalize and stay here, ride out his career and see if, he can get to another championship, with Pittsburgh. That's what it kind of comes down to a little bit in my eyes. But at the end of the day, like part of it for me too with Justin Fields is it's like, what are you really like hoping to get out of him? Like this is a guy, he's been in the league now. What this was his 4th year. Like, yeah, because the Steelers declined his 5th-year option at the start of the year. Like you're going into his 5th year, and you still don't really know like what you have here in this player. And that to me is where it's like you don't know at this point what you're going to get out of him. Like what's really going to necessarily change. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess my perspective on the quarterback room, and obviously we'll do a little bit more of a deeper dive on this, is definitely I think you're looking at keeping one of them, just because both of these guys are capable of starting and winning games.
Yeah.
But then I think the other thing too is kind of doing a blueprint of what the Eagles have done, honestly, or what even like a team like Dallas did with the quarterback room, where you have kind of someone who's established as a starter, but you take a little bit of a risk, and I don't even want to call it a risk. You put the proper scouting in to find the right quarterback that you could potentially see being a fit. And I'm not talking about trading away a bunch of assets to go up and get someone in the first 10 picks of the first round, but really putting in the scouting and kind of seeing where the fit is to potentially get a late first round, a second round, a third, fourth round quarterback that is maybe a little bit more of a project, maybe is going to take a little bit more development, but could potentially be the answer to the quarterback position that way. Because frankly, the Steelers are never going to be in a position to have a top 5 pick and draft
Yeah.
a quarterback that way. But I mean, I think it's been proven time and time again in the NFL that you don't need to have the first overall draft pick to hit on a quarterback. A lot of it goes into the scouting, and a lot of it goes into the development, and a lot of it goes into the coaching.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense to do that, but obviously, the drafts. It really depends on what happens on draft night. It just if it falls your way, it does, and if you want to give up assets to trade up maybe a few picks, then there's always these runs in the draft. But that probably makes the most sense because, like you said, they kind of have been kicking the can down the road. I mean, Pickett obviously wasn't the solution. You tried on him, but was that under the old GM?
So Pickett was the last pick of Kevin Colbert.
That's
And
what I thought.
then
Okay, yeah.
that's why I wasn't really So that draft was kind of polarizing for that reason because he was running the draft and then Omar Khan took over just prior to that season.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a little bit polarizing, dude, but honestly, I mean, like my take on it at this point, if we're going to talk a little bit more in the long term here, if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm drafting a quarterback in the first 3 rounds every other year until you hit on somebody. Because if you're going to continuously be stuck in this carousel of kind of like mediocre quarterback play, like you're like eventually you're going to hit on something here. And I mean, at that point, it's like you either have to be so sure that if you give up the draft assets to move up to a top 10, top 5 pick to get someone, that you're going to be able to make him the guy. Or to me, you just keep bringing in kind of these different options, in kind of some of these late first, mid rounds until you kind of see something that's a solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a better approach than just signing a mid-tier quarterback. Like it's and especially like short deals or something. Like there's only so many times you can do that and it works, but you can't just keep doing it. Like it's they're not first of all, they're not sticking long term, and then it's just you also paying them more than what you would as a like for a rookie. So
Yeah,
at least on the
yeah.
financial sense too, you would it makes more sense to draft someone. But yeah, that I get what you
And,
mean.
and it's like, hey, in that sort of like carousel that I'm talking about, you just took Kenny Pickett a couple of years ago, late first round pick, like didn't work out. Time to go out and draft another quarterback. And the nice thing with this draft is it doesn't seem like, and again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this because I do think this is a conversation for a bigger episode. But like, there's
Yeah,
going to be talented players that are maybe a little bit raw, or maybe are missing a couple of tools here and there, maybe need some work on their technique, whatever it may be. But there's going to be guys that are going to go probably in late first to third round that are probably capable of being, legitimate starters in the NFL. And it's
right.
it's not like it's something uncommon that we haven't seen before. I mean, when you even talk about, like I know I mentioned Jalen Hurts and I mentioned Dak Prescott. I mean, Kirk Cousins obviously is kind of coming towards the end of his career, but that's a guy who was a fourth round pick and was developed properly.
Yeah,
And another guy, Aaron Rodgers, coming to the end of his career, who was drafted at the end of the first round. Like, it doesn't always need to be the surefire, number one overall pick to have it hit. So, I mean, without going too deep into the weeds, that's kind of the game plan that I would have for Pittsburgh at the quarterback position is keep one of the current quarterbacks on the, under contract, or bring them back for next year, I should say, but also look to the draft to bring in a young starter in a mid or a young quarterback in a mid round to compete for a starting job.
yeah. And I guess the other thing I'll add, the Steelers are great at developing receivers and defenders for the most part, so they can afford to not, you know, use one of those earlier picks on one either of those positions because either way they develop them. So it doesn't matter what round they seem to figure out how to use them best. So
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess the last thing I'll kind of touch on here with the Steelers is just the conversation around Mike Tomlin, man. This from knowing me from doing this show. I am
yeah,
a huge Mike Tomlin fan. I think it's absolutely crazy any Steelers fans that are calling for the team to get rid of Mike Tomlin and bring in a different voice. I mean, it really blows my mind sometimes. Like I get that people getting upset over mediocrity. I totally understand that, but it's also part of this has to be on the fact of like the fact that the most important position in sports and quarterback really hasn't been resolved on this team since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Even towards the tail end of Ben Roethlisberger's career, it wasn't the same Big Ben that was making deep playoff runs for the Steelers and winning AFC championships for the Steelers. It was definitely a different level there, and like do like Steelers fans out there want to risk going into like dark ages with the wrong head coach that we've seen around the league? Like
yeah,
that's something where it blows my mind. What would teams like the Jets, the Raiders, the Jaguars do for someone like Mike Tomlin, who is essentially guaranteeing you a 500 record every year? Like it is hard to do that in the NFL in one season, let alone in every season of a coach's career. So
yeah,
to pass up on that kind of blows my mind. And it's the flip side of this thing, man. To me too, is it's like Mike Tomlin, like and John Harbaugh, like that far off on being kind of in the same, I guess, like tier or category of head coaches. Like both guys have won one Super Bowl. Both guys make the playoffs very regularly. John Harbaugh has done less with more over the last 3 to 5 years than Mike Tomlin has, and nobody's talking about his job being up for debate or up for conversation. So that's where it kind of blows my mind with what
yeah,
Mike Tomlin has continued to build year in and year out. That Steelers fans just want to kick him to the curb and move on from this guy.
yeah. This is it's a sad reality that every year it seems like this happens where it's just like, are they gonna move on? Like finally, and it's just like, no, like you said, you made great points. It's like it's almost like you're taking these 500 record for granted, but like you said, it's really hard to do season in season out. So um there's really no question that he should stay. We talk about next season as a different story, but like obviously it was a bad ending to it, but again, it's just he's been such a. I mean, he's been there forever, and he's just such a respected coach in the NFL.
Yeah.
Just accolades. I mean, all the achievements, and he knows how to coach a team, man. Like it's that simple.
Well, dude, I think you hit on two big things that I didn't even mention there. He knows how to coach a team. I mean, for the most part, Mike Tomlin always has his guys ready to go week in and week out. They're never shell shocked by opponents. And also in that same vein is the aspect that when you hear players around the league talk, like Mike Tomlin is the coach that they want to play for more than anybody else.
Yeah.
He absolutely has the respect of players in his locker room and around the league. Like that's never up for debate. And to me, that's a huge thing, along with just being able to kind of like have the pulse of the locker room, have your guys ready to go. I mean, that Steelers defense was out there fighting against the Ravens. Even though they were on the field the whole time and really, couldn't do much in the way of, kind of, keeping Baltimore off the field. They were ready to go in that sense, in terms of just like being, up and ready to go. The mindset was, hey, like, we know we've lost 4 games in a row, but we're going to be ready to go in and battle with these guys. So that to me is kind of a huge thing. I don't feel that Tomlin has lost the pulse of the locker room. I don't feel that he's lost kind of like his edge in terms of having his guys ready. I think that this was a gauntlet of a schedule to end the season with, very mediocre, honestly, skill position players on the offense, including the quarterback position. And ultimately, they just kind of got beat by a better team in the playoffs and down the stretch.
Yeah. I mean, the Ravens lost anyway, so whatever. they always win one game and then they're done too. So that's for another debate. So how much better are the Ravens? Whatever, that debate could go on forever.
Absolutely. Well, about 42 minutes in here, let's switch directions back to the Eagles now. Back to the team that's still alive here. And hey man, I don't know. Commanders, bro. I don't know if there's any better story kind of going on right now in the of the 4 teams that are left in the run that they've put together. I've said it before to you. I think I texted it to you yesterday, actually, it might have been. But I work for the Mets.
Yeah.
Commanders feel like the Mets of the NFL this season. Obviously Commanders a little bit newer of an owner in there, new GM, new head coach. You've got just a young, energetic roster, of players bringing it night in and night out. And, kind of going from the gutters of the NFC East to all of a sudden this incredible playoff team who's playing some of their best football right now to end the year and are making a run here to ultimately being 1 win away from a Super Bowl appearance in, Jaden Daniels' rookie year. The comparisons feel similar to me to the Mets. I don't know if the Commanders are able to get past the Eagles, but it's going to be an incredible matchup. I was shocked they got past the Lions. I did not see that one coming at all. And I guess I'll let you kind of take it here, man. I sort of set the stage with the Commanders a little bit. The Eagles matching up with them. We know what happened the last time these teams. I mean, what are your thoughts on this NFC Conference Championship?
Well, first off, let me say, don't forget the Phillies also went on a run like this when they went to the World Series. So, it's not just the Mets, all right? The Diamondbacks also did it too. So, I mean, just NL teams, whatever. But this isn't baseball. How do I feel? I feel, like I said at the beginning, I was like, every day that passes, I feel a little more nervous. But it's also like, the story is just like if it was any other team. Oh, sorry, go.
I was gonna say, let's dive into that. What's making you nervous about this matchup?
Well, it's Jaden Daniels, man. It's just like the way. I mean, they're the cardiac commanders, whatever you want to call them. But like, I mean, it is the truth that they're just so explosive on offense that, to me, it feels like you're gonna have to outscore them. It's gonna be a shootout type of game. For as even though the Eagles' defense is great, they're the best in the NFL. It still feels like it's gonna be a shootout. And to me, it's like first to 30. maybe probably wins the game. But that's just the general my general feeling about it. But I don't think it's gonna hit. Like neither team's gonna hit 30. Um, but it's I man, it's I just the more I talk about it, the more nervous I get. But I'm also like, this is just how I always get anyway. Um, but the thing that the Eagles have to do is really just contain Jaden Daniels because the second game that they faced him in the regular season, Jaden Daniels ran for I think it was 78 yards. The first game he only ran for 18, and I mean in his defense he was kind of banged up. He was injured. This time around he's healthy, way more way healthier than the first game. So you're gonna have to limit him. You're gonna have to keep him in the pocket. The good thing is the Eagles don't blitz very much, and he's really good against the blitz. So, Vic Fangio throwing a blitz here and there, but that's not what they do. That's not what they're known for. They're going to trust that front four, and if that front four can get to Jaden Daniels and, get him, a little unsettled, get him off his timing, then I think the Eagles have a real chance. But if they can't set the edge and, limit the run game, which wasn't really in either game was a factor, then this could be a long day and the Eagles could very much end up losing this game. But it really just comes down to, keeping him in the pocket. But I think they can do that. It's just going to be really tough because, he's Lamar Jackson, just not at that level yet. But he's just such a threat on like running. So that's going to be
Yeah,
tough.
it's incredible, and I think he honestly has a better arm than Lamar Jackson too at this point. I mean, he is going to be a superstar in this league, and I honestly think right now there's no quarterback still the best quarterback out of the four remaining right now in terms of how they are playing today. Like what Jaden Daniels has done to this point in the playoffs, like he's put up better numbers than Jalen Hurts, than Patrick Mahomes, than Josh Allen in purely the postseason. So he's played out of their minds, which has contributed, greatly to the Commanders' success at this point. Obviously, the shootout with the Lions was kind of incredible, and yeah, I mean it's going to be, that's definitely one of the huge things for the Eagles in terms of the fact that they don't blitz a lot. Keeping him kind of contained, but also just kind of limiting and sort of. I think one of the big things too is just like not letting the Commanders get any free yards, like making them earn every yard in this game, I think is going to be huge. Because like the Commanders are already going to put up a lot of potentially based on what they've done so far, put up a lot of yardage, move the football well. It's just like don't let them get anything for free, I guess is what I'm ultimately getting at here.
Yeah, can I just say that this is the best defense the Commanders will face, and they've already faced them twice, which could work in their favor, but also against them because the Bucs defense not exactly great. Lions defense was, I mean, they were injured all over the field. I mean,
yeah, completely
like
banged up
again. So yeah, that really didn't help them. And the Eagles are, apart from Kobe Dean and Quinyon Mitchell, who's training to play anyway, they're healthy. So this is like the best they're gonna get, probably remaining in the postseason, honestly, because the Chiefs defense isn't quite as good. Bills also not as good. So this is the toughest defense he's going to face, and they're healthy. So that to me, it makes me feel a little better, just as a fan of the team. But yeah, defensively, I think it's going to be it's going to be really fun, just a chess match between these two. The other thing I forgot to mention is the Eagles defense is gonna have to figure out how to deal with no huddle, because clearly against the Rams on those last two drives when it was no huddle, they struggled and nearly lost the game because of that. So I'm sure they're practicing that all week, no huddle, because it's just they go quick tempo, and it's just kind of reminds me of Chip Kelly a little bit when he was with the Eagles, just let's just go to get a line of scrimmage, call a play, let's go, we're running it. So they're gonna have to adjust to that.
That's a great point for sure. For sure is something they're gonna have to be prepared for.
Yeah. So, but again, I think they match up fairly well against them, and they're at home too. So that's But clearly, Jaden Daniels isn't fazed by anything, as we saw against the Lions. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I
Flip
guess
things over to the let's flip things over to the Eagles offense here against the Commanders. I mean, it's I imagine going to be very much more the same with Saquon Barkley, but what if any of your do you have your eyes on here in this side of the football?
I mean, you guessed it. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be Saquon because in the two games he faced, he combined for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns. In the two games he faced the Commanders, I saw some stat where even on the Giants, he's like averaging an absurd amount of yardage against them, like the most since a Hall of Fame running back. I don't remember what the stat was, but it was something insane. So he kind of owns the Commanders, if I'm being honest, just based off that. So they should be doing more of the same. They got to do it early though is the thing because I feel like in early in the games the Eagles try and pass the ball and try and get Jalen Hurts into a rhythm. It's fine, and unless he doesn't get into a rhythm and it's just they're stalling on drives, and at that point it's just like why not just feed Saquon? It doesn't have to be that complicated. So they have to feed him, early, and especially against this defense when they're one of the worst. I think they were second worst in the NFL the regular season, and so it's clearly a weakness. And the offensive line, like I said, has been blocking really well on runs. So you just got to keep doing that, and you can build play action off that, which for some reason this offense doesn't do as much as they should, and or are as successful as they should be. So if as long as you do that and do what you've been doing, just running the ball, chewing the clock, not kind of limiting Jaden Daniels' possessions on offense, and kind of relying on your defense, and I think you can win the game. I think it's going to be close regardless, but no turnovers like they've been doing all postseason for the last few weeks. They definitely have a chance to win this. I think they can win this game with this formula they've been, running with the last few weeks.
Yeah, man, and it's going to just be interesting, how much can they just kind of chew away possession a little bit too, man. I mean, when you talk about kind of the race to 30 that you said initially, it's like, that could definitely be the case, but I think a big factor of that for the Eagles too is it's like, can they just limit the possessions? Jaden Daniels kind of gets his hands on the football, I think is going to be something that's huge. Obviously, that's going to be done first and foremost with the Eagles. It's just kind of like a catch-22 a little bit because we have seen the Eagles be so explosive even with that run game where it's like, hey, that's great, but like to kind of keep pace a little, I don't think the shootout is where the Eagles want to be. The Eagles want to be just kind of grinding out the possessions, controlling the clock, letting their defense kind of get those big stops, and then just kind of like grinding out possessions and really taking their time and sort of how they meticulously drive the football downfield.
Yeah, that's just what they've been doing. So,
yeah.
But I have a few stats. I'm just gonna throw out there.
Oh yeah, let's hear them
if they're interesting to you. But Jalen Hurts is 4-0 in his home playoff games. So I'm just saying that this is for Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles. He has seen the Eagles go to the NFC Championship 1/3 of the time since he bought the team in 2001. So 24 years, that's 8 times, which is kind of crazy. Didn't realize that. But yeah, clearly successful owner. Since 1994, no QB who has lost their first Super Bowl has returned. Jalen Hurts has a chance to do that. Jared Goff had a chance last year too, but
this one that one's interesting. So that goes back to 1994.
Yes, last time that happened.
Fascinating to me with where that's a polarizing stat for a couple of reasons. First is obviously with Jalen Hurts, like the potential. So the stat is they've never gotten back to a Super Bowl. Not that they've never won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, they've never gone back to it, which is insane to think about, but it is true. And I don't know how that's still a thing right now. I mean, again, like I said, he has a chance to break that and end that with a win. The other thing that counters that.
I was also going to say, if he doesn't, let's say the Commanders win, and then you then have Jaden Daniels, and let's say the Bills win and Josh Allen, both of them in their first Super Bowl, there is then one of those two is going to potentially be continuing that trend going forward. So yeah, I find that stat fascinating, man. the quarterback that comes to mind the most for me who embodies that is Matt Ryan. Everybody thought he was going to get back to another Super Bowl at some point after he lost that 28-3 game, and he never did. It was honestly one of the saddest things to see. I was always a fan of Matt Ryan, and they should have won the Super Bowl that year. But of course, Tom Brady got, what was that, his fourth ring at the time? Fifth ring at the time, whatever it was.
I think it was fifth. Yeah.
I think it was his fifth, that one. But I'm sorry, continue with the stats.
Okay, this is the last one I have, but this one kind of counters the one I just said. There have been 5 rookie quarterbacks that have started a conference championship. All of them have lost. So just think about that for a sec.
So something's got to give one way or another with this.
Yep, one of these streaks is going to end, and I'm hoping it's the quarterback losing the Super Bowl, their first Super Bowl start. I really hope it's that one. But I've been saying this for a while. It's just like that stat really scares me, and it's eaten me alive. Since the postseason started, I'm like, this might happen where maybe it's Jared Goff doesn't get there, or Jalen Hurts doesn't get there again. I was always like, who's going to be that team that, kind of has that new quarterback that goes to the Super Bowl?
I will say, like, for me, just coming to mind right now in recent years of quarterbacks that, haven't gotten back since 1994, automatically ones that come to mind to me are Matt Ryan, who I mentioned, and Cam Newton. Neither of those guys had another team as good again as the one that Jalen Hurts has right now. So, maybe not even necessarily purely the quarterback play, but just the team that Jalen Hurts is on. I think that could be the difference. That this is a very special team, man, that the Eagles have assembled here. Like, they have some of the best players at their position in the NFL at every single position. It's incredible, the talent that's on this roster where, even if Jalen Hurts hasn't had the best season, just the pure talent on this team could potentially break this streak.
Yeah, this is the most talented team against the Cinderella story, the Cinderella team. Like this, it probably doesn't get much better than that.
I think, dude, I've been saying this, man. I think that the storylines this season in the NFL has been incredible. I think that, I have no clue if this is actually a stat, but I feel like just the major injuries have been down a little bit. We've seen a lot of teams just generally speaking healthy this year. Yeah. And the way that it's all coming to an end, you're seeing David versus Goliath in the NFC Championship, Dodgers versus Mets in the NFC Championship of these two teams. And then you're also on the flip side of it, you're seeing like the, greatest player of this generation in Patrick Mahomes against, his counterpart who's always been trying to just get over the hump against him since he's come into the league, in Josh Allen. Like, kind of like, again, not a David versus Goliath there, but just like a hero versus villain, and Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, man. It's captivating storylines. I'm personally hoping, even though I'm making these jokes about Mets, Dodgers, Commanders are the Mets of the NFL, I'm rooting for an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl. I think that they're the two best teams remaining right now. They're the two teams that I most want to see win a Super Bowl at this stage. So that's kind of what I'm pulling for here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that one of my coworkers, he's an Eagles fan also. One of my friends, he wants the rematch of Chiefs Eagles. I'm like, dude, I don't want to relive that whole thing again. I really don't want to go back. I would prefer Eagles Bills, even though our friend Matt Russo would be really annoying about it, but I think I could live with that.
That'd be really tough for you, Ricardo, just thinking about that, bro.
I lose either way, but it doesn't matter if the Eagles win, though. If they win, then everything's silenced. It's fine. But
yep. And we'll see, dude. Eagles right now betting favorites to win the Super Bowl with 4 teams
I don't
remaining.
Like that. I don't like that at all. Like, why not have the Chiefs and Mahomes favored? Like, they do it every year. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Whatever. But,
yeah. We'll see. And the storyline I didn't even talk about. Like, the Chiefs are going for a three-peat that's never been done before. They're 2 wins away from that happening.
I really
incredible storylines here, man.
Off
the top, have we ever seen a rookie quarterback win a Super Bowl? I mean, like, I don't know off the top of my head if that's also never happened.
That's never happened.
We've got some chances at history, man. It's going to be exciting here, and I don't know. I'm fired up for this weekend already, man.
One more thing. We got to do predictions, score predictions. So You
Sounds
want me
good.
to you want to go first or me?
I'll go first. I'll go first. You're the Eagles fan. We'll save your take for last year. I'm glad you reminded us to do this. I'm gonna say that the Eagles are gonna find a way to win this one. I think it's gonna be on the back of Saquon Barkley. I think the defense is gonna do enough to keep the Commanders contained, keep Jaden Daniels contained, and I ultimately think that the Eagles get the victory, and it's gonna be 27-23. They're gonna beat the
Oh my
Commanders.
god, dude! You were literally like, I swear we're on the same like wavelength there because I thought you were gonna say 24. I was like, that was my score, but I'm gonna just say this before I say my score. I think how it plays out, if it comes down to this, if the Eagles have the ball last with the lead, I'm confident they can end the game with Saquon and run out the clock. On the other side, if the Commanders have the ball while they're losing, if they have it last, I'm almost as confident that Jaden Daniels will go up down the field and score and win them the game. So I'm hoping. I mean, it might just come down to whoever has it last, but
Yeah.
that's what scares me. But I guess we'll see there. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna say it anyway. 27-24 Eagles. They do just enough and do what they've been doing this entire postseason and really the regular season. So I think the Eagles just find a way to win in the end. So it's gonna be close. I wouldn't be shocked if they lost, but I'm hopeful. It's something's got to give. One of these records will break. One of these streaks will end. Like it's
Yeah. While we're on the
nervous.
stats too, was interesting that this past week every team that advanced lost in total yardage, but they won the turnover battle. Which team's going to come up with that big time turnover or just potentially win the turnover battle in this game is going to be kind of fascinating to watch as well. Could be a massive factor in this game too. So, yeah, man. Any final thoughts here?
Oof, go Eagles, go Birds. I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to be a wreck on Sunday. I can tell you that much.
It's going to be crazy to watch. I feel for you, bro. I'm sure we'll be texting throughout the game and dude, go Birds. Hopefully they can pull it out. And, we'll definitely be breaking down everything one way or another. So until then, I'll talk to you later, my friend. Peace out.